Okay, good morning, everyone. I see people of the participants still joining the webinar, but we'll start with a brief introduction and people will get onboarded as we speak. Welcome on behalf of the Congress of Business and Economics. I would like to welcome you all to this morning's webinar. We're all looking forward to what I'm sure will be a powerful and concise presentation. I have a slight quandary in that how does one introduce someone that is already so well known? You all may have heard him on Radio 702 or Cape Talk, where he's the resident entrepreneurial and business growth content contributor. He's a keynote speaker at both local and international business conferences. As an entrepreneur and investor, Pavlo offers 25 years of direct experience in conceptualizing and building businesses across 4 continents. He has developed and brought to market business assets in excess of 350 million US dollars through a combination of business startups, turnabouts, sales, and acquisitions. Through Aurik, which Pavlo currently heads, he works with established business owners to get their businesses to the next level of growth and value. With around 400 clients and growing in South Africa and 98 in the US and UK that work with Aurik to build assets of value. Pavlo brings practical strategies, tactiques, and mindsets to the tough business of building business. There's one thing that I learned about Pavlo very recently also, is that he's also very proficient in 3 different arts, and one of them being Wing Chun Kung Fu. So not only is he a streetwise business guy, he's also a streetwise fighter. So Pavlo, I'll leave the rest to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yusuf, and welcome everybody. Interesting times, and it's times for us to really get control over ourselves. Mike Tyson was quoted and famous, in fact, for saying, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And it's so true. I've been punched in the face before, and it is a massive shock to your system. You know, in the early stages of martial arts, the first couple of seconds, about 15, 20 seconds after being hit in the face, you can't get your bearings. But over time, you learn that when you get punched in the face, A, it's not personal, which this economic shock we're all experiencing is not personal, but more importantly, you learn how to recover very quickly, in fact, in a split millisecond. There's one big difference, though. With a lot of people who get punched in the face, very few people eventually look like this, because this is what a winner looks like. After 43 fights without any loss, Mike Tyson was readying himself to fight Evander Holyfield. Remember, Evander Holyfield was getting his ear cartilage replaced and repaired from the previous fight, where Mike Tyson took a big chunk out of it. So they looked for an intermediate fight between these 2 big paydays, and they found this chap. His name's Buster Douglas. And he was a moderately well-known fighter, nothing special. He had 424 fights. He had won about half of them, lost about half of them. In any event, he fought Mike Tyson. And in the 8th round, one of the longest fights that Mike Tyson had to have fought, he knocked Buster Douglas to the ground. In the 10th round, because he got up, because he got his head right, Buster Douglas knocked Mike Tyson out. That's what a winner looks like, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk specifically about break build to reset your business for the corona economy. And the expression of break build is one that really, if you truly look at how you've built your business over time, as it matures and as it grows and as it expands, you're classically no different to a way a kid is raised. As a kid grows, you need to put new shoes on, bigger clothes. You need to create more space for the body to grow into. In a business, You need to break certain parts of it in order to rebuild for yourself and the business to get to the next level. It's an expression we're very fond of because it is a never-ending cycle, and it's part of being in business. Let's just really objectify businesses a little bit, because what I find is if we find a good analogy, it lets us get a bit of distance between ourselves and our personal circumstances in order to look at our business apart from us. And that can be very useful. If you can't separate your business from yourself, you then struggle to find objectivity. And as I mentioned before, the economic shock delivered to us through the corona economy is not personal. All businesses are in the same environment, as in all ships are in the same ocean. If you look at your business as one would build a ship or sail a ship, it offers a lot of benefits. The first thing is, every ship departs from somewhere and sets a destination to somewhere. That destination is critical because irrespective of how bad the seas get, how big the storms are, how terrible the winds might be, if you're clear on why you're doing what you're doing and where you're sailing to, it makes your ability to make decisions more effective. The next thing is every ship has a crew. And on a ship, if you've got the right people doing the right thing, within the right environment, at the right time, that's what gets you safely to the other side. When you are facing waves that are 12, 18 meters in height, washing over the decks, if your crew knows exactly what to do and everybody's at their station doing the right thing to get the ship safely through that storm, it makes an enormous difference. Impossible to do on your own, absolutely possible if you harness and gather your crew appropriately in the right time at the right place. You have an engine room and a bridge. So an engine room is normally below the decks. It's deep below the decks. You can't see the environment. The engine acts as a ballast. It steadies the ship. And the function of the engine room is to turn that propeller. That propeller gives you the forward momentum. Then you have the bridge. The bridge is at the highest point on the ship. And from the bridge, you can see everything around you. You've got navigation equipment. You've got weather equipment. You can see what storms lie ahead. And from the bridge, you've got all control over communications to the entire crew. You can ask people, tell people, direct people, and lead people to do the right thing at the right time. There's a big difference between in both places, and most business owners I certainly meet and work with, irrespective of size, mostly find themselves spending their days in the engine room, in the daily operational activities that make up the function of that business. The objective here is for us to get to the bridge, because from the bridge, we have control over the destination. In the engine room, all we have control over is momentum. A ship has to navigate itself. You know, you're in the open ocean. You need to know that if you're sailing from Durban to Mumbai, it's going to be an 8 to 12-day journey, depending on the speed that you can run your ship at. The smart captain is going to take 16 to 18 days of food, fuel, and water, because unforeseen circumstances happen. Finally, that destination, I fundamentally believe, should only be one thing, and that is an asset of value. And I'll give you a small description of what that looks like and what it means. That future focus, that destination, let's just think about what an asset of value is. It's got 3 characteristics to it. And this is how we should be seeing our businesses. The first is, it's a business that's got capital value and growth. If you buy a share on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and you invest, let's say, 50 Rand into the share, what you hope for is 5 years down the line, that share could be sold for 300 Rand or 500 Rand. That is the capital appreciation of the business itself, or of the share itself. And incidentally, that doesn't come by way of stock and vehicles and assets. It is a calculation that says to the buyer of that share from you, this business is run in such a way that the appreciation of capital at 300 Rand will move to 500 Rand over a period of 2 or 3 or 4 years. The next thing you want from your asset is income, a dividend stream. In your business, that's going to be salary, and it's going to be dividends too. So as business owners, we want two things for sure. The first is we want capital value growth. The second thing is we want income value growth. The third thing, the thing that is hardest to get right, the thing that leads to 94.6% of businesses started globally failing to ever sell, is that the business itself needs to be tradable. To the extent that you can build your business to operate primarily, largely without you, puts you in two positions. The first position is that should you wish to exit the business, you can enjoy the capital value of the business coming back to you by way of a massive, massive payout. That is, in effect, for business owners, their pension, what looks after them and creates a legacy for the next level of the business owner's family. The second thing it does, more importantly, especially if you're running a family business environment, if it takes you out of the operations, suffice to say that the operations continue without you, it allows you to get onto the bridge of that ship and then focus on next level growth. And that might be through acquisitions, through deal making, sourcing new products, finding new markets, establishing partnerships that lead to accelerated growth well above organic growth rates. So if we all agree that that is our destination, irrespective of how tough and unnerving things are at the moment, if we can agree that that is our destination, it creates a framework against which we're going to make decisions on how we navigate through this very, very real life storm that we find ourselves in. Let's just take a view on what we think is going to happen. Because when you set sail and when you're sailing, you need to be able to take a view of what you believe the ocean ahead looks like. I pulled this off a consultancy's website, and it speaks to very specifically the United States, which has probably got one of the worst strategies around dealing with COVID. But what's telling are two indicators here. The first indicator is that we're probably going to have testing capacity made widely available around July, August, September. The Abbott test is a saliva test, and within a few minutes, it enables you to know whether someone is infected or not infected with the coronavirus. I think in South Africa, we're probably going to get access to those testing capabilities in the early part of spring, early part of summer. The second thing that it says is that there's a potential vaccine for health workers in October, November. And thereafter, it will be widely available, probably around March, April, May, in the United States, which means we would have a 2-month lag. So the realistic view is that this is here to stay for at least 18 months, at least 18 months. And what's going to govern the environment we find ourselves in is one thing alone, and that is the capacity of the healthcare system to attend to those who are at risk from infection or once infected from coronavirus. The one thing the president, and in fact any president or prime minister, should never ever abide is having a situation where people are lining up outside healthcare facilities and cannot get treatment. That would be a massive dereliction of duty, because the first thing that any president or prime minister should look after is the health and the well-being of our citizens, especially in the case of a war or a pandemic or a massive monumental crisis of global proportion. So I see this running for at least 18 months. We are going to have various stages of economic enablement. From what I understand and from what I've read and from what I've been given access to, this will happen differently across businesses classified in different industries and sectors. And it will happen with a very definitive physical distancing requirement in place. We will move, depending on the infection rates and the ability of our healthcare resources to accommodate people who are critically ill from the COVID virus. We will move into periods of part lockdown, semi-lockdown, full lockdown between now and the end of the point, which is where that vaccine is available and freely available and administered to everybody in South Africa and the rest of the world. So let's take that view. It's a conservative view, I grant that. Let's say we are in this until June, July next year. In fact, let's make it August. Because An entrepreneur, a business owner, must always prepare for the worst and hope and pray for the best. I would rather we act to safeguard our businesses rather than pray and hope that our businesses will be safe. It all begins with you. And what this means is you need to understand where your head is at. And this woman, a wonderful woman called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, an American-Swiss psychologist, committed her life to understanding grief in families or in individuals. She spent hours and hours and hours at the bedsides of people who were passing on, and then within those families of those who had lost loved ones. And what she strived to do was to understand what kind of curve people go through with grief. At first, when you hear of your loved one being critically ill, you deny it, saying, arguing, we can beat this thing, you will beat this thing, you're a fighter. You go through a period of frustration for some time when you realize and start to realize that this is not going to happen, that the potential loss of that loved one is more certain than not certain. When you lose that loved one, you go into a period of massive depression. And that depression can last for a very, very long period of time. What she figured out then is once you start to emerge from depression, you do so through action by physically engaging yourself in new activities to move into what she referred to as experimentation. And when you experiment, you're looking to find a new path to life, a new way of living without that person. And through that, you then find what works, what doesn't work, you make a decision, you integrate it into your life, and you find a new path towards meaning. This might sound very dramatic, but not in my experience. People who start their businesses, who invest in their businesses, who live in those businesses, who commit to those businesses, who are thinking 24/7 about those businesses, the impact of an economic shock, that punch in the face as you fall down to the ground, wondering whether you will be able to get up and survive again, is akin to the Kubler-Ross change curve in terms of stress and anxiety. Recognizing this, understanding it, in order to understand yourself, understanding it and yourself in order to understand what you need to do to migrate very quickly from this area into positive inspired action is critical in the instance of saving your business. Take this on board. There's not one human being who doesn't go through it in the instance of a shock or a crisis. It's happening to all of us. I can share with you, 3 weeks before lockdown, when I realized that it was going to happen, all our plans in the US and in the UK were going to come to a halt. My frustration turned into anger. I was angry for 3 days. I was so frustrated. It dumped me into depression, and I lasted there for at least 3-4 minutes because that's my nature. I don't dwell on things. And I moved immediately into action. And for us as a business, as terrible as COVID is, it has been remarkable in terms of what we've been able to achieve and the help that we've been able to provide. So inspired action is absolutely critical to get out of this space. Measure yourself against this, see where you are, and then understand everyone else you speak to is somewhere on this curve. How do you control yourself through this process? The only way I know how is to work with truths, and there are very few truths. The first truth, undeniably, which everyone agrees to, is we are born. The next is we will die. Hopefully not from coronavirus if we're smart, but we will die one day. The next is you cannot change another person. And we have tried, whether it be your kids, whether it be your partner, whether it be whoever in your environment. The only thing that can change another person is a decision from that person to change. Absolute truth. Absolute truth. We have always lived in a world of uncertainty. I read extensively, especially around societal development and technology, because I'm constantly fascinated around how technology emerged the impact it had on society, how innovation and disruption was received, fought, and concretized into everyday life. And when I look at how technology came about, the threat of existence that it posed to some people was quite profound. When I looked at some of the big socio-political activities that we have endured over the last 3,000 years as a species, and you look at how trade routes were forged, how battles were won and lost, we have always lived in a world of great uncertainty. It feels like a lot more now because it is right now on our doorstep. And because of news and because of media, we seem to have a constant stream almost assaulting our sensibilities around the uncertainty within which we live. The next thing, and this was shared by a psychologist called Carl Gustav Jung. He was famous for quoting, "The is sacred." In other words, what it is what it is. Not, it ought to be this, it could have been that, it should have been this, but if only, no. No but if, no could have, would have, should have. What is. And the quicker you can get your head into the space saying, it's here, I have been punched in the face, I'm falling to the ground, now what am I going to do? Is absolutely crucial to the extent that you will act now and on time to save your business. The other truth is the only thing you have 100% control over is your attitude. You know, if you think about it, the way you choose to look at something, and this is why understanding the Kubler-Ross curve is important. This is why accepting the reality that we find ourselves in is the reality that we find ourselves in, as opposed to what could have been or ought to have been or should have been. The attitude you hold impacts your behavior, and your behavior, the actions you perform, will give you the result of the outcome, whether it be with your business or your relationships. If we get the right attitude, and for us as business owners, there is only one attitude, and that is we are here to build our businesses into assets of value. It will take us through that Kubler-Ross curve very quickly out of depression into action so we can start navigating our ships differently to get to the destination in the storm. And then I was speaking to Yusuf earlier about martial arts, and he said, well, what happens when you actually get hit in the face? Because when you do, the natural reaction, and imagine yourselves in that position, is you go, and you take in a sharp, sharp breath. That sharp, sharp breath goes into the top of your lungs, what's called your sympathetic nervous system. When you breathe only into the top of your lungs, it then releases cortisol and adrenaline. And that's when you move into a fight, flight, or freeze situation. It's instinctive, and it happens to all of us in the mammalian species. It happens to us as human beings. What you learn in martial arts is that when you get hit in the face, the first thing you do is you take a deep breath into the bottoms of your lungs. And when you take it into the bottom of your lungs, it prevents the cortisol, it prevents the adrenaline flushing through your body and activating the amygdala in your brain, which is your fight or flight or freeze response. Because what we need to do when we hit a massive wave in our ships is take a deep breath, remain calm, and ensure that we see things for what they are so we can lead effectively. If we panic in that environment, the wave that is sure to come after it will knock the boat over. The only attitude that we can also adopt is one that says, let's prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And what I'm going to share with you is how you prepare for the worst. So the thing is to understand your business in terms of priorities. And I love using this analogy, an onion, because I shared it with Marco Tufani, the current CEO of Anglo worldwide. It was at a cocktail event, and I cannot drink. I am terrible at drinking. He's Australian, and he poured a glass of wine, and literally out of politeness, I had one small sip, and my mouth didn't stop after that. It was very embarrassing. And it was embarrassing because he asked me, what do you think of Anglo-American? And I said to him, Mark, I think it's like a big fat onion. You've had too many fertile years in the mining sector and you've lost the essence of your flavor and taste. What is it that you do that makes you special? And he looked at me blinking a little bit, and as an Australian, he fobbed it off and moved on. And I was left wondering what I meant. What I meant was this. If you look at an onion, the inner layer of an onion is the sweetest part of the layer, the sweetest part of the onion. What's crucial about looking at your business is saying, what is the heart of our business? What is core and what is strategic, without which, if I don't control and have both, I will not exist. And I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say you run a service, a business analytics service. What does that mean if you offer that service to clients? It means that you have the ability to take on data, analyze the data, and then represent it visually into an interesting report that gives your client the ability to work with what you have given them. In that case, critical capabilities that are core and strategic would be the ability to analyze data and the ability to present it visually. Everything else in your business, honestly, is superfluous and supporting. Without those two components, you cannot exist. Now, this applies to your activities, but it also applies to your people. When you look at your inner layer, that's where you're going to hold and guard everything that says, my trading has stopped, but I can start tomorrow for so long as I have these people and these activities under my control. The next thing you're going to look at is the next layer. It's non-core, but strategic. So for example, if we go back to the data analytics business, what should they not be doing? Well, they should not be experts on computer hardware. That's non-core, but it is strategic. Without it, they can't perform their function. They need to have marketing and the ability to create a brand and promote themselves. It's not core to what they do, but it is strategic. Without it, nobody would know that they exist. There, you start to look at partnering. You might have it in-house at this point in time, but it is something you can pass on to and outsource to a partner. The final layer is the most superfluous layer. What is non-core? What is non-strategic? And the silliest example I can think to give you is buying pencils and stationery. Nobody needs to own that capability within their business. Those are commodities. They're available widely. If you have capability in your business to deliver that to yourself, it's the first thing that you can afford to shed. And sadly, it means that the people involved in the outermost layer are the least important compared to the people involved in the innermost layer when it comes to a decision that I'm falling, I'm about to hit the ground, I've got to make quick decisions fast. How do I manage my people? The next thing is you need to digitize everything around yourself. It's quite clear that physical distancing is here to stay. If you don't create a digitizing capability in your business, even if you're manufacturing in the foodstuff environment, in the retail environment, you will not be able to communicate with anybody, parties inside your organization and parties outside your organization. There are 4 layers that you need to get this right in. And I'm going to start off with the simplest and very quickly go through to the most complex. Right now, what we all need is the ability to communicate. The number of corporates I'm working with in South Africa that are literally pulling their hair out saying, where are my SME suppliers? They have not given us an ability to reach them. We can't communicate with them. They don't have screens across which we can engage and see what their capabilities are in order to service our needs. At the simplest level, their websites are out of date. They don't have a presence even on LinkedIn or social media where we can reach them through that format. If you don't have the ability to communicate with the outside market, how will the outside market, should they need your services and products, know whether you exist or not? If you don't have the ability to communicate with your staff, what it means is 2 things. As a business owner, you're going to be carrying this pressure entirely on your own. And more importantly, as a business owner, if you're keeping your core staff, your strategic staff, what are they doing to help you? How are they being productive in order to help you get your business organized, sorted, and ready to be rebuilt once we exit the lockdown period? The next layer of communications and digitization is going to be around collaboration. You know, for example, I'll give you a classic example. Numbers are really, really important. When you're sailing in a storm and those waves are hitting and bashing the ship, one after the next, in order for you to see ahead, you need data. If you have packages like Xero, like Sage, like QuickBooks that are integrated into your bank accounts, it gives you a very quick sense of what your cash flow is looking like. And that can alert you to where there are troubles or where there aren't troubles, ahead of all the other things that occupy your mind. Technologies that tie into your service providers then start to become important. Purchasing technologies that link your stock to your availability to service the needs of clients who might be reaching you now, either through screens or, more importantly, if you've created online ordering sites, becomes important. The next thing is coordination. You need your fulfillment and operations to coordinate with your sales and marketing. If operations and delivery, people who make your products, people who prepare your products, people who are required to fulfill your products and fulfill orders, can't see what's coming down the pipe from sales and marketing, how do you actually get efficiencies in the business? If you don't get that right, it means you will spend more time in the engine room trying to get the parts of the engine to work, rather than more time on the bridge, where you could be strategically looking ahead and saying, I don't like those weather systems there. We're changing course in order to get us safely to our asset of value. And then finally, there are a whole lot of elements in competition. It's not appropriate for me to talk about them now, but they're very, very clever technologies that allow you to use the Internet of Things and drones and artificial intelligence, not relevant for this conversation. When you create your digitizing approach, remember, you're doing it in order to engage your staff internally, and you're doing it in order to engage the outside world, your suppliers and your customers, most importantly. If you don't put this architecture in place in your business, again, I ask you, how are you talking to your teams? How efficient is that conversation? And how useful is it to get everybody aligned very, very quickly? If you don't have these communications in place, how do you know people out there need you? Because you certainly need them and you certainly need their business. So if we get that right, where we've understood our business, the inner, the middle, the outer core, we've created an ability to communicate with our teams and our customers and clients. We can now prepare our business battle plan. It's a war zone. Please see it as that. And you know what's interesting about warfare? Generals, where do they sit? Think about some of the big battles that were fought in the last 1,000 years, 2,000 years. Classically, the general sits on top of the hill and commands his troops using flags and drums. Where's the warrior? The warrior is right at the front of the battle, commanding his or her troops from that location. In a war zone, trust the intelligence, trust the leadership, and trust the direction from the warrior rather than the general. Because what happens in a war zone is you're right at the battlefront. You have the ability to read in the instant and act in the instant. Whereas what's happening at the battlefront only passes up to the general through flags and drums, minutes, hours, weeks later. If we have to act fast, the best place for us to be is right at the front line. We've taken a view on the corona economy, and now our strategy is simple. Survive the lockdown in order to grow after the lockdown. Necessity is the mother of all invention, and it's wonderful. I love necessity, because necessity says you haven't got a choice. This is something you simply have to do. not would have, could have, should have, ought to have. There is a sacred, we now need to act. During lockdown, these are some of the strategies that I've been sharing globally. It's a red zone. The only thing you should be focused on is saving your capital, save your business. Save your business so you can start up again. You need to take immediate actions, and that normally means drastic measures. Get all the money in and cut all the costs. It's about capital preservation. A lot of the techniques that are being used over here are techniques that immediately go to your market, go to your customers. If you have any outstandings, collect the outstandings. Give up profitability in order to collect those outstandings. If you've got people sitting in 30 days in arrears, give a small discount to get the money in now. It's about cash preservation more than anything else. Think of cash as the fuel in the ship that you're sailing. If you're sailing into a storm, you have no idea whether you'll be in that storm for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. The longer you're in the storm, the more fuel is burnt to simply keep the ship afloat, as opposed to keep the ship moving in a forward direction to your harbor. For that reason, you need to think about how to preserve your capital as tightly as possible. Go to your customers, collect monies that are owed to you. In doing so, also sell ahead of what people might need. For example, if you've got loyal customers, good customers, solid customers that have been with you for many, many years, they're the first people you should be saying, we have stock, it won't be sufficient to last us through this period. The global supply chains have been compromised in China, in Germany specifically. As a result of that, us getting stock is uncertain. Because you're loyal customers to me, I would like to ensure that you have stock for at least the next 3 months. Place a larger order with me, and on top of it, I'll give you a discount if you pay me COD. You've got to think around strategies to get as much money into the business as possible. When it comes to your suppliers, stretch your suppliers to the extent that you can and you have good relationships with them. I was speaking to a retailer. He's got 68 stores. He reached out to his supplier in China because China's gotten through the worst of the corona economy. His Chinese supplier turned around and said to him, Ian, we've been working with you for 22 years. Of the monies that you owe me now, pay me 30% immediately. The remaining 70%, you can pay me over deferred payments of 6 months, 6 months after you have begun normal trade again. In the interim, I will continue to supply your stores to support that ongoing trade. If you have those kinds of relationships and you can get those kinds of deals done, whilst we're all in the corona economy at the same time, we're not all the same. Certain parts of the world have started to move through those initial curves, and certain companies that we might work with, both as customers and suppliers, might be better resourced than we are. If you've got good relationships, this is when they count. You need to also cut costs at home. To the extent that we as business owners are the last people to get paid, and so we should be, in order to preserve capital in our businesses. Our objectives, remember, are to get up and to start fighting in order to get to the other side of this corona economy. That very same retailer took a 100% pay cut. He and his wife, who founded the business, agreed that she would take a 50% pay cut, because what that meant is that on 50% of her salary, they could certainly survive for the next 6 months comfortably. That's the benefit of remembering why you do what you do. In his instance, it is to build an asset of value. So in his instance, those decisions were easily made. Stop all costs that don't kill operations. I've been going on about this for some time. If you have space from which you operate that you don't own, in other words, you have a landlord relationship, stop paying and negotiate. And there's only one negotiation that is fair and reasonable, and that is all rents should be frozen for the period of the lockdown. To be fair to landlords, they too have got businesses that need to run. So pay your operating costs, but do not pay that rent, because that rent is going to preserve the most important assets you have in your business. And that is the people that are core and strategic to keeping that business alive. If you pay rent and you can't keep your team, the lockdown fades away. You can start trading again, but you have no people with which to help trade take place. You have failed in your mission to save the business. Take advantage of all the COVID grants and concessions that are being made. And if it comes down to it, negotiate with SARS too. Negotiate to keep the PAYE and to defer both PAYE and VAT. It's a tough negotiation to have and a tough one to hold, but I can promise you, if it's done correctly and SARS can see that you have approached them appropriately and with good faith, SARS are coming to the party big time at the moment, because they, more than anyone else, need to be sure that they preserve their future revenues. And that means that businesses need to stay alive. Rent, tax, people costs must be stopped or cut. When it comes to negotiating with your team, to the extent that you cannot afford to keep your team, remember, treat it like an onion. Look for those team members that are least necessary in this very, very difficult period, and move back from there all the way through to team members that are absolutely key and core. If you do this right, it's also very interesting how teams and businesses are coming together. If I go back to this example of the retailer, when he went to go and speak to his regional managers, 3 minutes into the conversation, after he had said what actions he had taken in order to save the business as a retailer, they turned around and said to him, Ian, we have ourselves independently met from you, and we would like to offer a 30% pay cut for ourselves over the next 6 months. That's what leadership is. If you lead through action, people follow. If they can see that your intent is to save the business, the likelihood that you will get, let's call it your managerial level, to come to the party is high. There was a condition, however, from those senior managers around the country. They said, we'll take the 30% pay cut, but please preserve the salaries and preserve the jobs of our retail clerks, because they are crucial in order for us to get up and going once we start again. Act now and negotiate later. I've been promoting this very, very actively. Do not go to your landlord now and say, I want to negotiate rent. Stop paying rent, send a letter ahead claiming why you are stopping to pay rent. Give a good understanding of the risks that you face as a business should you pay rent, and then speak to your landlords afterwards. Their first reactions are going to be aggressive. Their first reactions are going to be no. Their first reactions are going to be to lawyer up and line up for a fight. It's important that you actually stop all costs to preserve that capital and then negotiate later. But negotiate very, very fast after that. And then you begin resetting your business. The way that you do that is you need to get onto the phone and you need to get across the screen and you need to organize your team to do the same. You need to be speaking to all your suppliers and you need to be speaking to all your customers, because here's the reality. The problems that your business solve for your customers and the problems that were solved for you by your suppliers pre-corona are going to be a very different set of problems that those customers will face post-corona. If we go back to the retail environment, people are going to be desperately nervous to go shopping. If we see death rates climb, if we walk around shopping malls with people wearing masks all the time, people are going to be nervous to go into those environments. So their problems are now different problems compared to the problems they had before. If you don't adjust your ability to service those clients and customers differently, it means you're not cognizant of their new reality, which means you're not relevant to them. This is the time where you should be attempting to understand, what will my customer's new reality look like? The only way to do that is to communicate frequently and to over-communicate. When you communicate, you're asking the 1,000 questions. You're asking questions about them and their personal circumstances, because where in the Kubler-Ross curve are they? The extent to which they are in a positive area of the Kubler-Ross curve is the extent to which you'll be able to have a rich, meaningful conversation around how they would want you to serve them in the future. If they're still in the fear, anxiety, depression stage, it's going to be very unkind of you and impossible in any event to have a conversation about how you can serve them post-corona. In fact, if you work with them in that conversation to help them migrate through that Kubler-Ross curve, you will be remembered for being there, and you'll be remembered for the relationship that you crafted during this period. It is a wonderful time to do that. Exhaust all the support that's available. I put down a site. It's one of the more efficient sites that I certainly found. Take a photograph of the site. In any event, this will be made available to you afterwards. But go to that site. I believe it's being updated consistently. Exhaust everything that's available. And if the aid coming from government or other organizations is not suitable, not accessible, or you don't meet its criteria, do not fall into a situation where you turn around and say, you are wrong, it is unfair. Because the moment you do that, the moment you rely on anything outside of what you have control over, you're going to put yourself into a weakened position to save and preserve your business. So once we get through this in lockdown, hopefully we've gotten a good sense of what customers want that would be different. We have some ideas of what their lived reality is going to look like. We have some ideas on how we can now survive. And that means to immediately, calmly, steadily secure your business. What you have learned in the reset period of lockdown, you need to now start taking to market. So based on all the conversations you've had with your customers and clients, understand what they believe their concerns would be around how they engage with you, what products they need from you, what terms they need from you, what frequency they need from you, how they need to get it delivered, how they need to get it installed, how they need to consume it from you. Based on all the conversations they shared with you, start capacitating your staff and your team to meet with the suggestions they made during lockdown, but to know this, they too didn't know what it would be like post-lockdown. We're in an environment where we have to constantly change. That's why it's important to be a warrior at the front of the battle. You might be told, move yourself and your company and your troops to the left, only to find the moment you take 3 steps to the left, you're under fire again. Immediately there, go back, go forward, go right. Those are your options. You need to constantly test with your clients and your customers, whether the way you're speaking with them, whether the way you're engaging with them, whether the way you are positioning and selling your products or service to them is appropriate given their new reality and lived experience. Because what you do in order to find your path is you try, see what works, see what doesn't work, do more of what works, stop what's not working. Leadership from the front is crucial here, and your team need to be right behind you doing the same thing. The key and the secret here is to very quickly understand and plant yourself in the center of this new reality that we're going to be moving into. Because if you can get that right, you can then start to enable your offerings and digitize your service to communicate with clients and to provide them with the right capabilities. This is also a really good time to start investing in new clients and new customers. If your competitors have not done what I've shared with you to date, think of it from this point of view. You will be 3 to 6 months ahead of them consistently all the way through. And if you are, it means the likelihood that you will be one of the last businesses standing within your industry and sector is higher than that of your competitors. It also means that your competitors will be serving clients and customers that you could be serving, and they would be serving them with inappropriate offerings because they have not considered the new reality and the different changes and engagement strategies needed to reach their own customers. It's also a really good time to find good talent and good staff, because of people who are being ventilated during the lockdown period from work are available for work. You will get access to remarkable talent at a remarkably affordable level in this post-lockdown period. Exhaust all the support that's out there. I've said that. It's going to constantly change. Capitalize on it and exhaust it. It's during this period that once you start to get a sense of what your business is going to look like over the next 3 to 6 months, that you go back to the landlord and say, right, I froze my rent with you during the lockdown period. I now have a sense of what my business could look like going forward, and I want to renegotiate my contracts with you in order to accommodate the uncertainty we face within the next 6 months. Because if I get to the other side of the 6 months ahead of my competitors, I'm locking and loading my business for growth. And at that stage, we can revert back to the original landlord-tenant agreement we had. All the while you're doing this, explaining to your landlords your strategy to preserve your business and therefore to preserve their business through this. Post-lockdown, it's a new normal. That new normal will never be as it was pre-corona. Over here, it's strive, not survive. I beg your pardon. And this is where you immediately need to get back up onto the bridge. So think of it this way. In red, you reset the business. In the amber period, 3 to 6 months post-lockdown, you've reshaped it and rebuilt it differently to what got you pre-corona success. You've reshaped and rebuilt it in a manner that is more likely to succeed post-lockdown into the corona economy for the next year, year and a half ahead. That means your teams are capacitated, they know what to do, you know how to reach new clients, you know how to speak to them, you know how to create products and services that resonate with them, and you know how to fulfill their requirements once they commit to doing business with you. If you get back up onto the bridge, where you can start seeing ahead and looking at ships that you were competing with that are flailing and not doing well, it's where you have the opportunity to accelerate sales and look for value. I spoke to one of our clients, a trader, imports out of China and India particularly, sells extensively into the big cash and carry stores, the big chain stores, and independent retailers. He was locked and loaded with stock, and his biggest competitor that owns the Pick and Pay license came to him and said, please, we need stock. Can we buy stock from you in order to serve our client? He knew it was Pick and Pay. So here's the thing. What did he do during lockdown? The temptation naturally, right, would be for any of us to go and secure Pick and Pay. Because if we can secure Pick and Pay, take it away from a competitor and own that business, for him, it was a 30% potential increase in revenue in one single transaction, plus he had the stock to do it. Certainly the advice I gave him is sell the stock to your competitor. Sell it COD. Let them sell it to Pick and Pay and carry the 90-day terms. Because quite simply, we don't know what lies ahead. That was the lockdown strategy. 3 to 6 months after lockdown, it will be go fetch that client called Pick and Pay. And if you look around and you see competitors who have got stock and are still stuck psychologically and out of necessity in the save my business phase, the opportunity to acquire that stock at 50 cents in the rand or 60 cents in the rand or 30 cents in the rand will be yours to take. If they're not servicing their clients and customers, they'll be yours to take. And I have to speak to a business owner in the advice that I give here, because the nature of my relationship, certainly with the business owners that I work with, is that we as an organization work with you to look after you. It's competitive out there. It's always been competitive out there. And good strategy during this period will set you apart to outcompete and outwit and outplay your competitors 3 to 6 months from now. You have to get access to funding, because if these big opportunities present themselves for you to secure a major client that your competitor can't, because they're not ready or able to do so based on the work they did in the last 3 to 6 months compared to yours, or if you're looking to acquire new plant and equipment or stock for that matter, if you don't have funding available, you will lose those opportunities, because I can promise you 3 to 6 months from now, he or she with the cash will be the king or the queen. You have to earn your rights, your leadership rights. Trust is going to be imperative over here. Exhaust all COVID support and let your staff know you've done it. Let your suppliers know you've done it. Let your customers know you've done it. And let your other suppliers, the landlord, SARS, your telco, your municipality, whatever it might be, let them too know you've done it. Because if you come to negotiate with me when you have not capitalized on any support that's available out there first, I'm raising my question, asking, so why are you coming to me first? I'm equally struggling. From there, go to your landlords first. After that, go to the banks next. If you have installments that are running, send a notification ahead that you won't be servicing the notification or the installment during the lockdown period in order to preserve your cash so that you can service the long-term loans that you own after the lockdown period. The banks are receiving thousands of engagements around this. Then go to SARS. Remember, in all these instances, wherever you negotiate and how you negotiate, your bona fides, the fact that you're operating in good faith, is going to be crucial. People need to see the process you followed in order to preserve your cash. Plus, they need to see that you have a lockdown strategy, a post-lockdown strategy, and all of it is geared to lock and load you for growth 3 to 6 months after lockdown. It builds faith and it builds confidence that you've thought your business through very deliberately, very carefully. It says you're not being emotional. It says you're being rational and logical. And in a period of high emotion and high stress, that's what I tend to lean on in order to negotiate. From there, go to your telcos, go to your customers, and go to your people last. Go to your people last. You know, I say this with a lot of trepidation. Right now, it's not fair. It really is not fair. Our economic strategy does not correlate with our health strategy. Our health strategy is very fair. If you listen to the health professionals that guided Dr. Zweli Mkhize, our professor turned around and said, COVID does not discriminate. Be you male, be you female, be you old, be you young, be you rich, be you poor, be you black, be you white. And the health ministry said, it doesn't discriminate. So the rules around shutdown and lockdown apply in order to preserve life, first and foremost, especially those most vulnerable. And we all buy into it, because that could mean your or my life, or someone we love or care for, or one of our staff members. It's fair. Our economic strategy, however, at this point in time, is not yet fair. And I talk to the plight of the retailer more than anyone else. Let's say you own a sorbet franchise and you bought the franchise, you invested in fit out, and you service people's hands and nails. Why should you pay rent in the month that you cannot trade, and yet the landlord chooses to continue as usual? Why should the bank charge you bank fees, or any fees for that matter, in the month you can't trade? Because they continue to operate as usual. Right now, it's not fair, and it needs to be made fair. And that's why I'm saying, when you negotiate, don't negotiate around contracts in play, because those who are able to operate will always hold up the contract. You need to earn your moral leadership here and negotiate on the back of that. Because as SMEs, I promise you, we have been left on our own. I'm very interested to see what the 500 billion rand announced last night is going to bring to the party. And even then, I would argue it's not fair. Because if I go back to the example of the retailer, why would I go to the bank to secure a COVID loan provided by the Reserve Bank at extremely competitive rates so that I can take the loan, indebt myself further to pay the landlord when I still can't trade? How does that preserve capital? And if our strategies as business owners is to preserve capital so we can get up and running again and rebuild what we have lost as a result of this economic shock, how is that fair? The only thing that I know I absolutely need to get going again, but absolutely need to get going again, are my people in 3 buckets. Those that are core and strategic, next, those that are non-core but strategic, and then finally, the rest. That is how we earn our leadership rights to earn and save and preserve our business. And we need to fight for that. What I've given you over here is a strategy that you need to iterate. Truth will only ever be found in action, I promise you. Every single one of us have got a different set of circumstances, be it in our own psychologies, our own resources, our own networks, our own relationships, our own businesses in terms of size, location, our own resources, the money we have stashed to the extent that we've been able to, the stock that we might have had on hand pre-lockdown compared to that we haven't, whether we are an essential service or a non-essential service, whether we're located in an urban environment or a town or a village. Our circumstances are all different. What I've shared with you is a mindset, attitude, and set of principles that you can use to get through the corona economy. But trust me, you will only ever find out the truth of what works through action itself. You need to move fast and in many small steps. Remember the battlefront. Here you are, you're right at the front of battle. Bullets are flying, bombs are flying. You need to be constantly moving. Take a step, 2 steps, 3 steps, reassess, change direction. A step, 2 steps, 3 steps, reassess. You do not want to be sitting thinking at this point in time. Now is the time for action on the back of having done your analysis around your business and understood what your objective is. Measure to gain clarity. I promise you it's going to only get more confusing. I promise you, those of you that do not have the discipline to stay away from reading rubbish on social media will be sucked into rabbit holes, whether it be on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, call it what you will, even some of the news channels themselves. We're all on WhatsApp groups. There's a lot of speculation running around. My advice to you, honestly, would be take the view that I shared with you at the beginning of this presentation. Accept that it's here to stay over the next 18 months. Identify 1 or 2 sources against which you're going to measure whether your view still holds or not. And then please don't read anything more about this, because the only stuff that's going to be put in front of you is stuff that is going to raise a spike of anxiety around you and move you back down the Kubler-Ross curve towards depression, as opposed to positive, inspired action to save your business. Repeat the process to gain confidence. Again, iteration is where the answer lies. Take your team with you. Take your team with you and get them involved in reshaping and rebuilding the business. One of the best ways to manage the stress of your team is to get them very, very focused on the task, the objective, and importantly, to work with them frequently, daily, 3 times daily, 5 times daily, if that's what it takes, to co-create this new future alongside with you. In that, they can see through their action, they have some sort of control over their circumstances. But more importantly, it gives them a good sense that their futures are properly preserved and secured through your leadership. Be the best that you can be in the moment. I promise you, when you're out there sailing, I've been very lucky to do quite a bit of it. It's a huge amount of fun, and it can be terrifying. You cannot do this without a crew. You really can't. The other thing is that it's incredibly hard to read the surface of the ocean when it's storming and choppy. It's unpredictable in many ways. You need to have your plan of action. You need to be clear on what you're doing. You need to prepare through the red phase, as I shared with you, and then you need to act. And the reason that that preparation is so important is because if you can act with confidence, clarity, and certainty, determined by two things. Number one, you know why you're doing what you're doing, to build an asset of value. You're clear around what you will be doing in the red phase of shutdown, which is preserve the business and begin having the conversations needed to give you a sense of what the new business needs to look like. And then post-lockdown, moving into the rebuild phase in order to get to the other side of rebuild so you can reignite and accelerate your growth and regain what you've lost. That sense of clarity around purpose will come through in the way you communicate with people, the way you act, and through that, the way you demonstrate leadership. People power your business. Preserve them, look after them, nurture them to the extent that you can. With that, I've taken more or less just over an hour. I apologize, I stole 5, 6, 7 minutes on my allotted time. What we've done is the recording on this website, I'll make available on our platform over here. On that platform, there are a whole lot of other resources. We've spoken about how to digitize your business in a lot of detail. For those of you who don't even have a website, it's a useful resource to start. And for those of you who are looking to develop Internet of Things capabilities in your products and services, it'll take you right through the different layers of how you digitize your business. There's a lot of detail there around negotiating with landlords, a lot of detail around negotiating with SARS, the letter templates that you're free to use over there. There's a tremendous amount of content around how you manage and work with your people. There are books that I think you should be reading at this point in time. Bruce Whitfield, who I do a show with on 702, wrote a book called The Upside of Down, and he speaks about some remarkable businesses in South Africa that were built during very, very difficult periods in South Africa. I happen to write a book called Sweat Scale Sell, and it talks to the stories of 11 business owners, no different to you or me, right across sector, from manufacturing in the food sector, to construction, to retail, to digital and data services. I can't remember some of the other stories, quite a bit in the retail space as well. And they are people who started against all odds. And what they did is they took an asset of value view on their business to begin with. And through that, it gave them a series of steps and actions which are available to any business owner to help them manage and migrate their business during a very, very tough time, and be sure that they build a platform that is going to let them emerge with massive growth opportunities. Specific questions you want answered, you're welcome to post over there. And further topics that you want covered, you're also welcome to post over there. It just so happens that we have a COVID version of the book, through no fault of yours or mine, and through no foresight necessarily from myself. I managed to do an Audible recording of the book. I read most of my books as a business owner on Audible because I'm constantly doing things. I try and read 3 to 4 books a month on business just generally, to broaden my understanding and knowledge on culture, on technology, on social dynamics, anthropology, human behavior, technical elements on how to secure funding, invest, disinvest, etc., etc., etc. And the reason I use Audible, I hope I don't embarrass myself, is because normally when I'm waiting between meetings, I can listen. If in the old days, when I used to drive to meetings, I could listen. And in the old days, and still now, when I need to use a loo, I can still listen. And through that, I can squeeze out every second of time, putting myself in a position where I will be different from one second to the next. And with that, I thank you. I hope I've given you some value over here. I hope that you've managed to get some ideas. If you found this useful, please do share it with people on either side of your business. You too have got suppliers, and their well-being aids your well-being. You too have customers, and their well-being aids your well-being. We're all in this together, and we will strive to get government to adopt a fairer position on our economic strategy to match the very fair position of our health strategy. Thank you all. Have a good day further and get into action.